All right, well, I should go 7 o'clock. Tom did say he'd probably be late. I don't think he's on yet, but we should get started. Debbie, why don't you go ahead and we'll call the meeting over at 7. And really, we're going to try something new. We'll start today, but my expectation is that we'll continue this process. So when I was participating, well, Jennifer and I both participated in this OSBA effective meetings, I think it was called, training. One of the things that came out of that, and there were several, but one of them was this idea of actually having the agenda reviewed and approved at the start of a meeting, which we both really liked. So we're going to do that. And the way that it works is basically, I suspect on most meetings, it'll go something like, something sort of akin to the, standard fare. You're going to make a motion to approve the agenda as published. But if there's anything that you think is missing or wrong, that's also the opportunity to say, hey, I move that we add or amend the agenda in the following way. And then if somebody were to say second that, we could just, if it's not seconded, somebody else can make the motion to approve it, right? And we can go on. So that's kind of the way we're going to do it. To give any more backdrop, I don't think at this point, I guess I would accept a motion regardless of what it is.
I move to approve the agenda.
So moved. We have a second.
I second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, moved and seconded. I can't see everybody on the screen right now, Debbie, so let's do the roll call version, please.
Sorry. Jonathan?
Yes, I vote to approve.
Jennifer?
Approve.
Janet?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes. Yes.
Irv? Thumbs up. And Lori?
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor?
Okay, motion passes. All right. Normally our superintendent update occurs during our regular monthly meeting, but right now, given everything that's going on, even 2 weeks is a long time. So we're going to give Scott and a slot here tonight in our work session and just give us another update, kind of see where things are at, give us a chance to hear where he's at, ask questions if we've got them. So take it away, Scott.
Thank you, Jonathan. And, we may want to just think about this going forward until this crisis is over. I just think, the more we communicate, the better. We can never communicate too much. And when we thought we have communicated too much, we need to communicate some more. So before I start with my remarks, I just wanted to congratulate both negotiating teams on the classified contract. I had the privilege of sitting in on those negotiations and observing, because I came to the district after that had been going on a few months. And I need to tell you that in my 23 years, I've never seen as collaborative of an effort as I saw between both sides. And I wanted to give a huge shout out tonight to Janet, to Tom, who was in there in the early stages, and Dan and Steve, and on the district side, and Kevin Palmer. You talk about a lot of hours that were put in, and long hours, and negotiations are tough because they take a long time. It's one thing to talk back and forth, but the caucusing is what really takes a significant amount of time. And I just can't thank you enough. And a huge shout out to Vance and Hobie and their team on the classified side. It was just, I would say, a win-win all the way around, fair contract. And I'm just really proud of both of them, of both teams, and I'm really proud to be a part of this district. Dan, can I turn it over to you? Would you like to say any comments real quick?
Yeah, if I could, I'll just really mainly echo and put something on board members' radar to reach out to me if you have any concerns with, but I'll start with the echoing of your words there, Scott. Really got to thank Hobie Williams as the OSEA rep and Vance Taylor as the local president, and their team for coming to every meeting, very well prepared, really had a strong approach to bargaining in terms of prioritizing issues that they knew would be relatively easy to ones that they knew that were going to be relatively tough. And by approaching the work that way, it makes it easy on our side too, because it just allows you to prepare for things that, yeah, we can, the easier ones and approach one way, and the more difficult issues in another. And so their organization and their willingness to listen, and even as we got down to the home stretch, it was just, we got to 8:30 last Thursday night, and we thought made some significant headway, and it was really nice to be able to get that done at 11 o'clock that night. So the other thing I really want to point out is the inclusiveness of the Classified Association. It's one thing to talk about that, but they started the bargaining session without a 10-month employee on their team. And they went out and sought to have another voice at the table to include in that. And I think that really made a big difference, because most of our classified folks are our 10-month employees, are the assistants that are working in the classroom. So that's just a real, to me, it speaks volumes of really they really sought to hear the voices of all their members. And I really appreciate that. But again, and to also echo what Scott said there with, Steve and Kevin and I have that second time around and it just really makes for an effective team with both those guys are really organized, and it really helps us be effective as a team. And also to Nancy Hungerford for bringing her 30 years or more of experience to the table was well done. And Dana Peterson also served with us quite a bit early on. Conflicts and scheduling made it tougher towards the end, but she leads a department with a lot of classified folks in it. So and we were happy to two primary economic is our classified folks will get a 3.5% COLA for this coming school year. And we also added a step 8 to their salary schedule, which will progressively move over the next off of step 7 to give those folks, which is 45% of our workforce, are at the 7th step of the contract. So for 45% of our classified folks will get an additional step. So that's somewhere in the range of, I think, close to a 5% increase for them this year, I think is what that equates to, if my math is right. I leave the math to Steve in most instances. One thing, I don't think anybody would have a concern with this, but we need to enact it before it's ratified, is identical to our licensed CBA is an opt-out provision of $400. So if a classified employee qualifies for an opt-out of health insurance, so you have to qualify for an opt-out of health insurance, they would get a $400 contribution to what's called an HRA VIBA. And we talked about that last month a little bit, but we need to, we will start, and we got approval from the classified folks today to be able to start working with their folks prior to ratification, because we can't wait for ratification to get people enrolled in that. So if anybody does have any concerns with that, please reach out to me as soon as possible. Otherwise, for anybody who does qualify for an opt-out and wants to take that opportunity, we're going to start getting people signed up for that.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for that update, and really proud of you, Dan, and all the hard work you've done. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can I say something really quick? Scott, would you mind?
Go right ahead, please.
Thank you. Listen, thank you to everybody, the team. It's been a long bargaining seasons, and I really appreciate seeing the hard work going into, both the licensed and the classified staff bargaining. It's very hopeful. And I'm just grateful to have such a great team be a part of that and come back to us as a board with the good news. It's a relief, honestly, to be able to move forward. And I want to give a special shout out to Janet Alanak. Her incredible communication skills that she has shown on this board for the very first year of her 4-year tenure, to be able to be on a bargaining committee your very first year, that's something to say from a board perspective. And I appreciate her volunteering her time to make every single meeting and work with that team to make things happen as well. So thank you, Janet, as a first year board member. We really do appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Oh, sure. Of course, Shelley. Thank you. And thank you, Janet. And, if we can end negotiations by truly saying that in Silver Falls School District, we take care of our own, then that's just a beautiful thing. And it takes both sides to come together and come up with a fair contract. It's hard work and it's detail oriented. And anyway, I'm just really proud to be a part of our district. In terms of COVID planning and reopening schools in an online format, I just want to give you an update on where we are right now. Now that we have a plan, we've had a plan in place for about 2 weeks now, ever since we had the new metrics from the governor. Those metrics are not improving. That's not surprising to us. Since the town hall, we've been moving all of our attention towards the opening of the school year, which started last board meeting with asking you as a board to start the year 1 week later to give us additional days for pre-service. So we're knee deep in planning that. Hats off to Leslie Roach for working round the clock to deliver us a draft this morning at our cabinet meeting for those 2 weeks. It's a comprehensive professional development framework. Most of that will be Edgenuity classes and Canvas, but we also have a significant portion where teachers can differentiate to whatever their needs are. And we've also purchased additional resources for teachers that are very practical and geared towards the online environment by way of organization and engagement strategies as well. So that's what you'll see in terms of sort of a workshop model during the PD weeks. And I'd like to extend the invite to each of you, each of our board members. If you'd like to attend one of the sessions, you go right ahead. You're free to do that. And I'll make sure that you get the schedule as soon as it's finalized. Teachers really want to have it. They should have it within days. We meet once a week on Wednesdays as an administrator group for an hour and a half. And we will continue meeting on Wednesdays for the duration of the crisis. It's so important that we meet weekly. When we get back to normal times, it'll change. But for now, we need to bring that to them on Wednesday, get their eyes on it, and then we want to get it out to teachers. The main obstacle that we're dealing with right now is the monster called data integration. And so we had a briefing today from Brett Milliken and his team. They have been working really late nights trying to get all of that set up so that teachers can have access to Edgenuity and Canvas with current data. That's really hard to do until scheduling is all finished. So we're up against two different things right now. Brett seems confident that teachers will have access within a matter of several days. Right now they're beta testing. They're using last year's data. And when the scheduling is all finalized, teachers will have access to their new student data and schedules. That is a monumental effort given where we started on July 1. It's absolutely incredible because July 1, we didn't have a program to support teachers like we have now with Edgenuity. So that took us until the end of July almost. And then Brett and his team got started only several weeks ago. So my hat's off to Brett and everyone in his IT department. They're really our unsung heroes in this. We are taking the initiative right now to contact every single one of our bilingual families one by one. We have a team of bilingual folks in the district that are contacting these families, and we have a script for them to go over all the different points with families. Number one is getting each family set up with Parent Square so the translation devices work. And it's really incredible, the algorithms that are so sophisticated now with translation. You know, as a bilingual person myself, I can tell you it's really surprising compared to what these, you know, Google Translates used to be. So we're doing that. We're making sure that each of these families are set up with devices, or if they have questions about devices, those questions are answered. Asking them if they have any questions at all with scheduling, internet, and all of that. So we're taking in that data, and with that, then we'll build an action plan on families that we need to prioritize. We've also been in contact with the pastors of a couple local churches. United Methodist Church is reserving some space for us if we need to bus kids to a location, no more than 10 indoors, that has full internet, and we can arrange meal service and transportation for those kiddos too that don't have internet and don't have cell service to use a hotspot. And so we have a plan in place there as well. October 5th is a date you want to circle on your calendars, because that's the date that we're going to come out with an update on where we are with online learning. And so whether or not we feel that we are on track to open on November 16th, or if we need to go all the way to the end of the semester at the end of January. We want to make that announcement on October 5th. Number one, to give families plenty of time to plan, make arrangements, but also we're giving that date to our community to have something to hold on to. You know, it's really important that we at least give our families some hope that we're going to revisit this, that we're taking this very seriously, that if we think we're going to open, we will let you know. But at the same time, if we're not going to open and it doesn't look good, we'll tell you that as well. And so I just want to let you know, we chose October 5th because that's what the other districts around us have chosen to do. North Santiam, Cascade, and Mount Angel. And we just felt that it would, you know, fits right in with, you know, to be consistent with other districts in the area. So just wanted to end with that. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for me.
Any questions for Scott? I don't have any questions. I've been watching those numbers, and I'm concerned because the bar was set at an almost or virtually unattainable level, which I think they're going to either have to change the bar or just call off the year, because getting below 10 per 10,000 per week is next to impossible, I'm afraid. So anyway, that's my inspiration for the day.
Janet, did you have a question?
I'm just wondering if you had any updates on Hope Academy that you wanted to share. There might not be. It's a big thing to have to launch, so I just thought I'd ask.
You know, I smile every time I hear Hope Academy, because it's just so advanced, the thinking behind it, and we've secured a location. It's a 6,000 square foot location. It's very close to the central office. I can't remember the address off the top of my head. But it will be ready in December, and the building is set up to have social services and therapeutic services housed at that location. It's multiple floors, and which is what we wanted, because we also need to house our bilingual welcome center and our intensive academic support piece that will tie into the, you know, social services and therapeutic services as well. So Jen Hannon is working on that full time. It has her 100% of her focus, and we're right on track. I think the challenge that we're running into right now is Jen wants to know exactly when she can start bringing her kids in to a location, and so we're working on that. There's a lot of guidance that came out on the 11th that's complicated. It's really complicated. We want to make sure that when we make the decision to bring in some groups of students, that we're being very consistent with our decision making. So that's not going to happen right away. But Jen's out there doing child find and identifying these kids as we speak.
Does it happen to be the corner of Brown and Water Street?
Yes, I think it's near, yeah, I think it is.
I think that's the only two-story building near the
Yeah.
central office. Cool.
That is the building.
Yeah. And again, this is paid for out of SIA dollars. We received 30% of that funding this year. It's $1 million. Not all million is going to that, but a good portion for startup costs.
Okay, any other questions?
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll move on to our discussion items. The first one actually is also one that I think Scott will talk on. We've decided that we're going to set up a superintendent policy work group in an effort to maybe streamline the policy updates that we've been talking about. It's hard sometimes to fit them all into meetings depending on all the other topics.
Yeah.
It's also difficult to dive into really specific wording questions and things like that. So I thought it was a great idea. Scott, why don't you share what your thoughts are about it?
Yeah, well, obviously we have a couple of board members who are interested, and it all starts with that. I really appreciate the interest around policy, and any way we can help the board, with policy and support that, we're more than happy to do that. So shout out to Shelley and Lori and Tom as well. Tom is going to be able to manage some of his time to serve on the superintendent's work group for policy. And we are right now scheduling the meeting. So if you haven't gotten back to Debbie, here's your friendly reminder. I think we've heard from one person so far. So we're scheduling that. I will send the board the agenda before each meeting just to keep you in the loop. And we're happy to report out on that after each meeting. I'm thinking we're going to meet once a month and probably last about 90 minutes. I think the first meeting, we need to establish what our priorities are. As all of you know, OSBA sends us at the district office updates every quarter for policy updates. So that obviously is an ongoing thing. And then there's looking at what the compelling reasons are to prioritize certain policies to make adjustments or revisions. So I think it's a great way to get a little bit more systematic about how we talk about policy and get everybody at the table who's interested. And so I think it'll be great.
A procedural question, and I don't know if this needs discussion because we haven't really talked about kind of the step 1, 2, 3. If I, as a board member, have a concern about a policy, do I bring that to the board first? Do I take it right to Scott? Do I send it to our board representatives on that committee? Or is that a process that we still need to work out?
I think it's a good question. I think there's a number of possibilities, all of which would be viable and licit, right? So, as a board member, you can make a request to the chair or to the superintendent about any concern you have really at any time. You certainly could also speak with any of the members from the board that are on that working group, right, to share those concerns. I do think that broadly speaking, our thinking is that we'll first funnel questions through the working group and then back to the board to avoid the sort of conversations that are maybe we don't have all the information yet. I mean, the working group's a lot more informal. You can just talk through things and whiteboard things a little easier. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things that will be helpful about the work group is just establishing the compelling reasons for why we want to update a policy, right? So it gives us a chance to have a conversation around that we can then bring back to the board. And if the board wants to then direct me to take a deeper look at that, I can certainly do that,
right,
too. So.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
I just wanted to say one thing. Scott, thank you for calling and inviting me to be on the policy committee. I'm excited to do the work and excited to work with you and whomever is else on the committee. And the other thing is that I know that we just talked about process. And we actually do have policies already adopted that we should probably look at our first meeting just to review because we can't just make up a new process. We have to actually look at the process that we have adopted already And then if we want to make changes to that process, we need to make sure that we implement that language. So I'm anxious to do that with you and the others. So I will email Debbie as soon as I get home with my dates. So thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course.
And actually, a quick follow-up question. Is there a process already established for how we go about nominating and selecting community members to serve?
Yeah, you know, Shelley and I talked about that actually just a couple days ago, and I would need to look at that and get back to you, Janet. But it makes all the sense in the world to me. I think that's one of the things. What I told Shelley was that'd be one of the things we'd put on the agenda for our first meeting to talk about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
But I think that makes all the sense in the world to me.
Great. Well, I really appreciate it. I think it's going to work out well. Any other questions or comments on the work group?
Yes. First of all, thank you, Scott, for thinking ahead and putting together a work group on policy. But would you be willing to touch just lightly on a conversation that I had with you and Dan? As many of you know, we had a very courageous student speak to us at the last board meeting about racism. And when you think about it as a board, we also had a group in September 9th, 2019 speak to us about the concerns of racism in our school district, which led me to the discussion with you and Dan, Scott, about what can we do and to say that we are absolutely against racism. How does that look in statement or policy? But I know that's deep, but if you wanted to touch base a bit, just for those students who are out there and
Yeah.
for Oriana's words, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is deep. It's serious. This is a serious issue. And I've only been in Silverton a little while, and I'm new to the area, to the district, to the culture, the way of doing things. But one thing I can tell you is that racism pervades every single area of our society. It's systemic. And if we are in a place where we're saying we don't really have racism around here, that's just not true.
Right.
And that's what makes it so insidious. So for me, at least, as a superintendent, what I think is the most important is that we start talking about this. We start meeting each other where each other is right now. And some are further along than others in their understanding of how these things develop, the historical nature, and understanding our own privilege. So I think, and these are uncomfortable. These are uncomfortable conversations that we need to have. And we need to be honest and open and accepting non-closure and all of that. But I really feel strongly that needs to take place. If we are to arrive at an anti-racist policy, then we need to come to agreement on a couple of really important factors. And those are the things we need to have some discussion about. Because one of the things that I would not be in favor of is putting forth an anti-racist document that is so watered down that it loses its meaning. And that's about as direct as I can be about that. We need it. It's overdue. It's 2020 and we just passed an equity policy. And so we are behind the times. And I'm speaking to you as an educator and as an administrator, that it's something that we need to prioritize.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. Anything else regarding the policy work group? Okay, well, we did have two policies that were kind of queued up for board discussion. There'd been some work done on it by various board members. And so we did bring those forward today as discussion items. I sort of outlined for you guys that the aim here today is to do one of probably three things with a given policy. to either recommend particular, I'll call them high-level changes. In other words, we're not drafting the actual draft, but we're basically saying we'd like to see these types of changes. And there'd be a motion and a vote to recommend that to Scott for the work group. Also, we could basically discuss it and say, we don't have enough information, let's table it for another future meeting. Or we could outright say, as a board, we don't feel there's anything particularly wrong with said policy and recommend that we don't make any changes. So those are kind of the three high-level things that we're looking for. As far as the first one, it is in fact the board development or board policy development, excuse me, which is essentially the policy that outlines how we draft policies. And so I don't know, Lori, if you wanted to start off with some background or Shelley. I know that.
I think it was Shelley who provided her edits, and if she would like to talk about those a little bit more. I think we're looking at how to give it a lift a little bit. One of the things that I wanted to ask about it, if Shelley, did you want to go first? I'm sorry, I didn't want to run over.
Oh, no, actually, that's okay. That's the reason I submitted my edits to the policy of BF when we had the discussion a couple of months ago to take a look at Dbea, right? That was the initial, policy, the initial policy that was brought up because we were going to be appointing new budget committee members. And then I said, well, we should probably look at Dbea because we've had some concerns in the past. So when I went to look at Dbea, I looked at our other policies where there are policies that have already been adopted by previous boards that has a process of how to do this. And so policy BF is one of many policies in the BF family that kind of is a domino effect that I learned that talks about the process and what you do and if you want to change policy or you want to modify it. So I wanted to make sure that, the discussions that we had as a board and the ideas that we came up with a couple of months ago as a board and agreed upon made sure that followed that policy. And so, I took those ideas that we had and agreed upon and I kind of implemented them into that policy to BF and just made my edits and thought, well, if we're going to do this, we should probably change the language because we wouldn't be following our policy to modify or change policies. So anyway, I don't have my edits in front of me just because I'm in my car on my phone. But my edits, I looked at multiple different school districts. I looked at Beaverton, I looked at Lake Oswego, I looked at Medford, I looked at Eugene, I looked at Coos Bay, I looked at multiple different kinds of and sizes of districts. And I looked at their wording for BF. And the wording that I implemented into my edits are some from theirs and then also language that molds to our district, like what we wanted to do. So that's what I did initially, and I turned it into you and Scott and said, here you go, here's my edits. And then you and Scott took it from there and then discussed, maybe a policy committee, things like that. So my edits speak for themselves. And, that's really it. So, and here we are now. So.
Okay, well, that's a good background. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I feel that if we're having the work group take a deeper look at this, it might be a good policy to move to that work group, I guess, to fine tune it a little bit more, unless one of the board members right now sees something that jumps out to them.
Well, and I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Scott, did you happen to look at the edits that I submitted or anybody else submitted? Did you happen to look at that policy and kind of edit it yourself, or has that not happened quite yet?
I didn't make any edits. And I didn't do that because I felt that, you know, first needed to be talked about by all of you to see where you wanted to go with that.
Debbie, would it be possible for you to place the edits from Shelley up on Zoom? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'm doing that right now. I had just the agenda up, so I'm pulling up the full, so I'm getting there.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a chance to review some of the edits. I reread the original, kind of compared it against the one from OSBA. I think our original one was very, very close to the OSBA draft or template version of it. I don't recall there were very many changes that we'd made originally from that.
Well, and I'm not sure if we have updates from OSBA that need to be made into that policy. And that's one thing that Scott mentioned about the policy committee is that the district office receives updates from OSBA. And, you know, we need to see if this policy in particular has any updates. And then, you know, see if this language is more conducive to our district and is a little bit shorter or, you know, more concise to the point, more broad instead of getting in the weeds. So,
Jonathan, I don't know if you can see my hand is raised.
I could not, but thank you for saying that.
I just wanted to remind everybody that we did talk about the update. I think that's a great, what Shelley suggests is a really great process to go through. But we did consult OSBA on that policy and there haven't been any updates. So just to shortcut that process, you don't have to go through that.
Right. Thank you.
oh, I'm sorry. You guys have already checked on the updates for the BF?
Remember, I shared that at the last meeting that we talked about this.
Oh,
So-
that was for BF2. Oh, I thought it was just for DBEA. I'm
No, it was
sorry. Okay.
for
So you checked
both.
on BF2.
I checked for
okay.
on both.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Sounds, well, I haven't heard from everybody yet. It sounds like there's maybe some idea of moving this to the work group for further discussion. I would certainly support that as well. I don't know if anybody's wanting to move us along here.
We need a motion for that then, Jonathan?
Yeah, if there's not a specific, you know, like if there's nobody pushing for a specific discussion on it, then yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, I would move the board policy development draft as edited back to the working group for review and any changes they deem appropriate. And then look forward to receiving it back to us again.
Second.
I'll second. Oh,
So moved and seconded that we move it to any further discussion on BF to the work group. Any further discussion? If not, Debbie, why don't we go ahead and do the vote real quick?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Jonathan,
Yes,
Jennifer,
Jennifer, you're on mute.
can anybody see her for a thumbs up?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Thumbs up.
Thank you. Janet,
Yes.
do we have Tom yet? No Tom. Shelley,
yes.
Irv,
Yes.
and Lori.
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor?
Okay, thanks, guys. So the next one is DBEA, which is a similar conversation, although, we may have a different outcome, I don't know. The idea is that this is related to the budget committee selection process. Well, it's related to the budget committee broadly, but I think part of the reason this is pertinent is that, our selection is coming right up. And so we wanted to make sure that we reviewed this if we were in a position to try to affect change before that process was complete. So looks like she's pulling it up here, so we'll wait for that.
And I will have a question after it's pulled up.
Okay, well, go ahead. I mean, it's up. She's just scrolling. So.
Oh, okay, very good. One of the things that I wanted to ask the board, and just for clarity, that I noticed, and this was probably the 7th paragraph in, it's underneath, no budget committee member may receive any type of compensation from the district. Then it has a paragraph. And the last sentence of that paragraph, it says, however, it will be the usual practice to limit services to 2 consecutive 3-year terms. I have a question. Is there some reason why it has to be 2? I was wondering if it was 1, but maybe the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm looking at providing opportunity of the community to be more a part of this budget committee and sort of sharing that opportunity by having 1 term as opposed to 2. I'd like to hear from the rest of you if there is a problem or whatever with that.
Sure. Anybody have any thoughts you want to share with Lori on this?
I'd agree that this is Janet. I'd agree that 6 years feels like a long time. I mean, I don't know that it necessarily would need to be, or maybe it does need to be a 3-year term that may be set out somewhere else that, we don't have flexibility on. So yeah, it seems to me that that's a lot. I guess I would support 1 3-year term or 2 2-year terms, something that's sort of closer to a 3 or 4 year assignment as opposed rather than a 6-year assignment.
Yeah, excellent point, Janet. I'm wondering if we could just have a 2-year, because then instead of running it into 6 years, then you have at least 3 opportunities to have other community members be a part. And I think that's critical. I believe it's something that we should definitely weigh and consider.
Mm-hmm.
And make it a part of it.
Sorry, Lori.
No, go ahead.
I don't think you can see when I raised my hand. And we don't, I wish that hand raising feature was available. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that board members don't always interpret that limit, the usual practice, as a limit, and have voted to extend people's time for other reasons that are also on that list, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And then the second thing is that in the past, in the 3 years that I've been participating on the budget committee, there have only been 2 meetings. And so that's not a lot of time to, I don't know, feel like you've done the work that you came to do. Like I would suspect that if you asked some of there's 2 board member or 2 budget committee members whose terms are expiring, I wonder what they would say, just about 1 term. Like, did they feel like those 6 days that they got to meet as a budget committee really accomplished what they set out to accomplish? Like, do they feel like that was job well done, like they contributed? So, and I don't have strong opinions either way on this, but that's just a point that I wanted to bring up.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Can I say one of 2 things? Oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan. I thought you were, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to just share, I really quickly just pulled up Oregon statute here on budget committee. That's ORS 294.44. And under clause 5, budget committee members are to be appointed for terms of 3 years unless the budget is a biannual budget, in which case you can appoint for terms of 4 years. So just heads up that we would be following law if we stick with a 3-year term, and we would not be if we change it. So.
Well, I'm in favor of following the law. So thank you, Jonathan. I just want to mention one of two things, some historical information. In recent years, there has been an uptick of community members who are interested in the financials of our district. Previous to that, I don't think it was a very popular place to be. People were not volunteering. There weren't enough people who were applying or wanting to be on the budget committee. And so I think that's why in the policy, we have it currently as 2 3-year terms. But now that the environment has changed and has changed for just a few years now, you know, I guess we should probably have language to reflect that uptick in community involvement. The details of that, I don't know. I completely understand what Jennifer said and agree with her on that. I agree with Lori and Janet. They're all 3 kind of different ideas. And I think it might be at this point, since we have so many ideas floating or thought processes, it might be a good idea to send this to the policy committee to not only revisit those ideas, but also look up statute, also talk with OSBA, and maybe our team could come up with a more efficient way or of language to have in our policy for this. It won't be on time for our current appointments, but you know, actually I want to get it right instead of just rushing it and handing it out and not getting it right. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather hold off and be on the safe side to make sure that our language is correct for the future instead of just quickly handing it out because we have to. But I'm glad we're working on it because it is time sensitive and it is effective right now. So yeah, so that's just my 2 cents.
Then I have a question. So so hypothetically, we then turn it over to the work group. What if we decide to go with 1 term? As we're going through the process of looking at our applications for the budget committee, will that impact the ones that we are considering? Actually, we don't vote on the applicants until the spring. Is that correct? For the budget committee?
Typically, we do it in the fall. September, October, November are common months. There rarely is urgency to do it prior to that because, frankly, we don't ever have a budget committee meeting until usually March at the earliest. So.
Right. Okay. Because I just don't know if that would be that one piece, if that's something that we need to determine now, so as applicants are coming in, they know what to anticipate. I'm just looking at the transparency of that as opposed to saying, surprise, you know, guess what? I don't think that would go over too well. And so that's why I'm coming back with that topic of concern.
Thank you, Lori. And I got a couple of points that I'll make on that. One, the work group actually can't, I mean, they can decide what to recommend and bring back to the board, but they don't actually approve anything, right? So if the committee decides to go with 1 term, it still has to come back for full board ratification on that, basically, including a couple of readings. So.
Thank you.
And then also, there's nothing in the current policy that would preclude any board member from effectively taking how long you've been on the committee into account anyway. I mean, there's nothing that precludes you from voting or not voting for somebody for most any reason. There are recommendations and guidelines offered, but there is nothing that suggests that you couldn't vote for somebody new over somebody who's already been there just because that's what you want to do, right? I mean, that's also already possible.
Jonathan, I have one comment and then a question. Actually, let me just address what you were just saying. I absolutely agree with you. I think it also can be very powerful in a policy to indicate your intent to be more inclusive and to allow other people to participate, just as a matter of kind of for what that's worth. But I don't disagree. You know, we have that opportunity to vote. So in the paragraph, and I'm looking at the edited version, the paragraph on the first page that begins at its first meeting in July, someone, I think it probably was you, Shelley, added, it would be best practice to have the applicants attend a board meeting to introduce themselves and answer questions. I totally agree. I'm wondering though, and this is sort of a wordsmithing thing, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just wanted to note that we might want to say applicants will be encouraged to attend, because otherwise it puts us in a position of having to decide, are we going to enforce this? Are we not going to, you know, sort of that aspirational pitfall. So just a suggestion there, and I'll send my little notes and chicken scratches over to you guys. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. The very last paragraph, which someone had inserted in red, which spoke to this sort of financial working group over the course of the year, and that there had been a commitment made by the board to the budget committee that we would honor that in spirit. That was crossed out. I imagine it was crossed out because it's not a board function. It's a superintendent function to decide how he wants to convene that working group, and it doesn't necessarily belong in a board policy. Okay, I just wanted to confirm that, because I think my strong preference is that we still pursue that goal, but I understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be in the policy because it's not a board function. So I'm seeing nodding heads. I think I'm good. If I've missed anything, jump in.
No, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, Janet, those are excellent points. About 3 years ago, another little bit of history, I had proposed to the board at the time when we were doing budget committee appointments that it would be really nice to have a face to a name on the applications, and maybe the applicants could come to a work session and simply introduce themselves, and if we have any clarifying questions that we want to ask them, that we could do so then. So it was just an idea about 3 years ago, and the board liked it. We didn't take a vote and, you know, pursued it. It just kind of was like, well, that's a good idea, and let's keep doing it. So it's just more of a personal touch, you know, for you know, to get together and say hello and share, you know, their thoughts if they have any more thoughts from their application and such. And the second point, and I did put in that financial group information. I just put everything in the policy because I knew that it was going to come to the board. I knew that it would go through Scott in the correct process and then come to the board. And this is the perfect example right here at this meeting, how the process works. When, you know, the policy committee, you know, works together as a group, Scott brings it to the board, and he introduces it, and we decide, you know, we have discussion about it as a board in public. And what you did right now is exactly what is supposed to be done in the process. And then if there's changes, you know, I've never heard that we had to take a motion and a vote to send it back to the policy committee. We've never done that in the past. But it would just go back to Scott, and he'd bring it back to the policy committee and say, hey, this is what the board said. And so this is actually a perfect example. So yeah, that's why we talk about it. And this is healthy right here of a good process. So thank you.
And back to
And by the way,
Janet.
just a point of clarification. Sorry, I just want to clarify one thing. We don't actually have to vote to have it show up in the work group, but to speak as a board, we have to, in order to provide that level of sort of, we've spoken and this is what we'd like, right? So, any board member can request something show up at that work group, and that's fair, but to speak as a board, we do have to pass it as a vote.
Oh,
Okay. Lori, I think you were going to say something.
yeah, and as I think about it, it probably is just a wordsmithing, but Janet brought up a good point about there might be a sentence that says encouraged but optional to appear before the board and introduce yourself. Again, this is just a thread that ran through my head. And again, that could probably just be passed on to the work group.
So one thing that occurred to me as you guys were talking about this is, I don't know that I'm opposed, but I am generally not in favor of inserting things that are going to bind us up. So literally only 3 or 4 years ago, we had trouble getting people to apply. And I want to make sure we don't, that could recur. I'm not saying it will. Just because the last few people have been interested doesn't mean 3 or 4 years down the road they will still be. And I want to keep that in mind also, right? Flexibility in a policy is good. Yes, Jen.
So that's, oh,
I was going to say that something similar, that just the idea that policy should be broadly written,
Yes.
not too specific, and that the talk around limiting the term for practical reasons, that concerns me a bit, because we as Shelley said, there's been an uptick recently in the last 3 years of applicants, but that could easily turn the other way, and we're left with a policy that's what we don't want to be in a situation where it says we have somebody who's willing to serve again, and nobody, right? So I think that's just a practical concern.
Right.
So with what Jennifer said, if something were to arise in that manner, could they not reapply if you had the limitation of 1 3-year term? I mean, at least that would reopen the application process, and they would have the option of reapplying.
Well, basically, that's how it works today, Lori. I mean, so you serve
Yeah.
a 3-year term, and you either
Yeah.
reapply or you don't. So
Yeah. Well, I was just mentioning because I think with the families, the quarter-century families that are coming into our school district, I think we're going to have quite a few interested applicants, but that's it.
no, I mean, this is really good, and I agree with Shelley. This is what we're supposed to be talking about, to get our thoughts out there.
Mhm.
One of the things that I'm trying to sort of figure out if we're coalescing on any particulars, and really this one is feeling to me like it's going to just probably have to go back to the work group also. But I'm curious, is there any particular item that we want to try to speak as a board on? I don't know that I heard one, because there was a lot of different ideas being floated around.
Well, we haven't talked at all about the aspirational, recruitment sentence, and that's the one that causes the most trouble, I think. And if the committee can figure out a way to, integrate these consideration points, but then make it flexible enough so that folks don't interpret it as you didn't do the right thing because you didn't, hang your hat on gender or hang your hat on location. I would really appreciate that.
Right. And didn't you say, I think, Jennifer, you're the one that brought up that the templated version does not actually call out those aspirational goals. Is that Do I remember that right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at OSBAs, they don't have anything like that. And I imagine that, you know, I don't know this for sure, but I imagine when Silver Falls School District was formed 23 years ago, it was, you know, the amalgam of all these different smaller school districts that that was a really important thing for them, is to make sure that there was geographical representation. But I do want to point out that I can see 2 other budget committees members' houses from my house, despite the fact that we have that in our policy
Right.
and have gone through a process. So that's just, you know, 3 of us, seriously, we can see each other's front doors. And so I just wonder about all the effort that goes into that. And then what are the practical results, and what is the, you know, expense of relationships when people say, well, she didn't vote for this person and it says it in the policy. That is just every year, that's what I feel like happens. And it's just like a no-win situation.
Yeah. Anybody have any thoughts on Jennifer's point here?
I do. I agree with Jennifer on multiple points. There's things that we need, the language that we need to look at in this policy, I think needs a significant facelift. And I think that there's a lot of critical areas that we need to look at in multiple different, you know, areas of the language. It would be, I think this one could be a little bit longer, you know, it would take a little longer to work on, but, you know, but these ideas that are coming out from board members are critical for the policy committee to take back and review and come up with, you know, reasonable language that doesn't stifle us, but also doesn't, you know, is too broad. So I guess my suggestion at this point, well, and to Lori's point though, to get something to the people that are applying now, you know, what we could do at this point is, you know, leave the language as it is now for this group, but then work on this policy for next year and have it ready for next year. I don't know. I don't know. Anybody else? I'm kind of at loss for thoughts here on that.
Jennifer gave a thumbs up. I don't know if everybody saw that.
Oh,
I think that's reasonable. I think that to rush through wouldn't be a good idea, but also this budget committee selection process is flexible. We don't have to appoint anybody until before the first meeting, which usually happens in March or April. But we've also talked about having this informal gathering. And is that going to be composed of current members or new members? Well, we're only electing 2. So, I mean, I don't think it's a huge, or not electing, appointing. I don't think it's a huge deal if we wait to appoint those budget committee members at this point, but maybe other people have different ideas that make sense too.
I tend to agree. I don't think it's critical. I think there's time. I also think that our current policy is flexible. I mean, but there are things that are suggestions, but there is nothing. I mean, Jennifer's right. It gets us into conversations that are sometimes awkward because you can interpret it maybe multiple ways. To that end, I agree. It needs cleaned up.
it does.
But I don't think it precludes us either from appointing 2 new budget committee members. I mean, I think there's plenty of flexibility built in anyway.
Hey, Jonathan, can I say something, please?
Yeah, please do.
I agree with Shelley. I get so much angst sitting here listening to this. I know it's important to talk about, but what really bothers me is during this COVID, Corona, whatever you want to call it, period, we have so many other things to figure out and to help these kiddos out. I wish we could just tank all of this policy issue for another year and spend time doing what really matters. All of these policies have been working for years. I don't think we spend all of our time and energy working on these policies helps out with these kiddos. We're spending so much time wordsmithing and striking out this and adding this. I would encourage each one of us to accept what somebody else has put in place for a short period so we could spend time doing what we need to do.
Thank you, Irv. I think there's merit to that as well. So.
Well, I'd like to ask a question. Irv, can you answer this for me? What is it as a board that you think that we are supposed to be doing to get the kids back to school? That Scott is that we do as a board, and what's the difference between us and Scott? What are we supposed to be doing?
Well, I would actually leave that up to Scott. Whatever he would like us to help him with, or that we can do that would further the education of these kids in this time. We are so far from being out of the woods. I think it was Jonathan that said that earlier in the meeting that he has doubts of going back to school in brick and mortar. And I am kind of feeling the same way. So I think we have a lot of things to figure out logistics wise, and there's just so many other things to consider. If we're going to sit here and talk, I want to talk about something that's going to make a difference. These things we're talking about is from past feelings personal people have had about an issue. I'd rather, let's spend our energy helping somebody.
Well, I have to say, Irv, that I mean, in my mind, I've talked to Scott multiple times, and I have told him if anything that he needs, he has from me as a board member, and anything that he has asked me to do, I can safely say that yes, I'm happy to put on my boots and roll up my sleeves. But you know, Irv, there's not a lot for the board members to actually do. When Scott asks us to do something, I can safely say that I do it. He asked me to be on a policy committee, and that's what I'm going to do. We are doing this district, everybody in this district is doing everything they can to help these kids and this COVID-19 issue. And I take offense to the fact that you are criticizing our work and the work that we've been asked to do to help our superintendent. And so it is our job as board members to make sure the policies of this district are up to date, are in place, and ready for our superintendent to implement throughout this district. And there are policies that we need to look at, that we've had problems with in the past, that need to be looked at. So I would appreciate it if there were more proactive words coming from you as a group of board, for us as board members to move forward in what we're supposed to be doing. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. You're right. I agree with you on that. But I'm not going to sit here and allow you to say that this doesn't matter or that this is not okay.
Jonathan,
because
can I have,
it does matter.
can I have
Yeah.
a point of order?
Yeah.
I think we need to
I was
stick
just
to
gonna-
the agenda, and I think that I think that there's a lot of the things that people are saying right now are valid, and we voted to approve the agenda at the beginning of the meeting, and so I think that we should probably stick to it. That's just my 2 cents.
Agreed. Yes, Lori.
I'll make this as brief as possible. First of all, Irv, I understand your concern. I do hear you. I believe that Scott is putting together a work group so we can move this in a more appropriate area. But also, when we talk about things like bullying and racism and policy, those directly are intended for the students to help them. That is to protect them. There are other policies in there and we're going to be talking about those. Dan will be sharing some of his policies that are part of what's going on with this current pandemic. So be clear, these policies aren't just words that need wordsmithing. They are intended to help employees, but to help the students as well. And I'd like you to consider that for this evening. And I too would like to move forward with the rest of the policy.
Okay. So just to reiterate what Jennifer said, and I wasn't sure where you're going with that, Lori, but let's go back to the actual agenda. So we're talking about DBEA currently. And so I guess I'll bring it back and say, is there any other topics around DBEA? There's been plenty said, some opinions shared. I thought they were interesting. I think they're, as Shelley's pointed out, no matter what happens here, they're gonna be at least taken into consideration by the work group because they heard it, right? So, so are there any other points that people would like to make? I've made the points I wish to make. I'm just curious if anybody else has anything they want to say about this policy. Okay, so I heard enough to make me think that this policy also should be referred back to the work group for further consideration. I didn't hear any specific motion to move forward with a very particular idea. I would entertain one if you had one that you wish to make right now.
So we do not need to move if we just wanted to go back, because we moved,
No, I
last
think
time we made a
can do
motion.
that. I'd like to move that way too. I was just giving one last opportunity to make a motion to go any other direction than that, basically.
Got it.
Oh, okay. I'd just like to say that I think that we should delay appointing budget committee members at this point. We did that last year. We delayed budget committee members until November when we appointed them. I think it would be healthy to move this to the policy committee and delay our appointments until we can get further into this and have a more final draft of our policy.
Shelley, would you like to turn to a motion, please?
You bet. I'd like to
That's
make
not
a
on the
motion.
agenda, though. That's not on the agenda. If we want to do that, I think we have to either amend the agenda at the beginning or put it on the next agenda for the next meeting so that people have time to reflect on it and think about it and gather any information that they need.
That's a fair point. And specifically the policy question, it sounds like you're wanting to move to the work group. If you'd like to put that into a motion, that'd be great.
Who did you want, Jennifer or myself?
Sorry, Shelley, you, that part in particular, yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to move DBEA discussion to the work group.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, Debbie, why don't we go ahead and take the vote on that motion?
Jonathan? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Tom, is he here yet? All right. Shelley?
Yes.
Irv?
Yes.
And Lori?
Yes.
I see you. Thank you. All in favor.
Okay. So the next 4, I'm going to briefly lump together. Well, I guess we can go one at a time. So all 4 of them are second readings of policies that were up for a first reading in our last meeting. And they're all recommended policy updates from the administrative team regarding primarily COVID-related updates. So BFF is the suspension of policies. Thank you, Debbie, for bringing that up. I don't plan to read them all. Then you've also got GCPC, the retirement policy, with one very minor tweak being made. We also have GCBDAA related to COVID-19 and its corresponding policy also related to COVID. I'll just open it up to any of those. Are there anything further that we need to discuss as a board? Anybody's welcome to ask. Otherwise, those are our action items for tonight, which is to vote to approve those policies as drafted and as read at the last meeting as well as at this meeting now. Going once. Okay. I think we're going to move straight next into action items. 5A, policy BFF, suspension of policies.
I move to approve policy BFF.
Second.
And seconded. And Debbie, for each of these, why don't you go ahead and, as soon as it's been seconded, since there was no discussion prior, you can just call the vote, please.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Irv?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
All in favor.
Thank you. 5B, policy GCPC, retirement policy with the update being made to it. I would accept a motion to approve it.
I make a motion that we approve GCPC and GDPC regarding retirement.
So moved.
I'll second.
And seconded.
Okay, we're voting. Jonathan?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Irv?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
All in favor.
Thank you. Policy GCBDAA/GDBAA, COVID-19 related leave. I would accept a motion.
I'd like to make a
approve that.
motion. I'd like to make a motion to adopt policy GCBDAA/GDBDAA-AR, COVID-19 related leave.
Second.
Sorry, actually, I think we're on the
Skip one.
5C still.
Oh,
We took one. But 5D
Well,
has been
let's
moved.
adopt that one. We'll go.
We can certainly adopt 5D next. It's been moved.
okay.
And I think Lori seconded.
Lori seconded it.
All right. And this is, are we at 5C or 5D?
5D currently, that's the one she read.
The AR. Thank you. Jonathan?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
Shelley?
I see a thumbs up.
Perfect.
Yes.
Irv? I got you, Shelley. Irv?
Yes.
And Lori?
Yes.
All in favor.
Okay, and now 5C, which is GCBDAA /GDBAA, COVID-19 related leave.
All right, this is Janet. I'll do it. I won't read all those letters. I move to approve policy GCBDAA/GDBAA COVID-19 related leave.
So
Second,
moved. Lori seconded.
For the vote, Jonathan,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Irv,
Yes.
Lori,
yes,
all in favor.
Thank you.
was alphabet
Is it-
soup.
Yeah, it is alphabet soup.
Thank
So at
you
this
for
point-
thank you, Jonathan and board, for passing those. And I will notify our HR and business departments tomorrow, especially related to COVID-19 related leaves, so that we can be notifying our employees and getting those into potential, notifying our employees. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
I would like to say one thing. I had someone reach out to me regarding the budget committee application and the current one. And I did reach out to Debbie, and Debbie said it is online, but it's probably buried with much more information related to school opening and COVID related, but it is online. And so she's going to be speaking to Derek about that, just to bring it up, the application. And I was going to ask, do we have a due date on that?
August 31st.
August 31st? Wow. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. Without objection, meeting is adjourned.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Nice to see you.
Good night, guys.
Good night.